Hey everyone, welcome to our tutorial on React. In this video, we shall be talking about the context API in React. I know in our previous React videos, we talked about the context API and how it should be used. If you are just watching this video for the first time, context API in React is a feature that is used to pass down values from one component to another component in the component tree without having to use props. Now let's just get straight to building our project. So we are going to build a project that will be switching from a light mode theme to a dark mode theme. So we are going to do that using the context API in React. So let's just get straight to coding. This is my project folder. Here in my src folder, I have no file in it. So I'll just create my index.js file. And in my index.js file, I'll import React right there. And I'll import React DOM. Here I'm going to use React DOM to render our app to the screen. And let me pass in the component here called app. Even though it's not created here, then let's grab the ID of root in our HTML file. And that's it. So let's import app before we create it. Let's say import app from app. Now let's create the app file that's wasn't created, app.jsx. I like using the .jsx extension. That's my preference, but you can use the .js extension if you wish. So I'm going to import React with components right here because I'll be using a class-based component. Then I'd have this, let's say app here, and let's just pass in a div here to get that error out in our JSX. Let's save that. Now in our app.jsx file, we are not setting states. We are not doing anything with the states there. Let's take that out. And this is going to be our parent component too. So the component that we are going to create, I'll call this display board. Let's save that. This means we are going to create another file called displayboard.jsx. So let's import this first. Let's say import displayboard from displayboard. Now let's go ahead to create the displayboard file. Let's say displayboard.jsx, and our file has been created. So let's import React and component. And let's have this written there, displayboard. Now in the displayboard file, we are going to write some things in our state here. And actually what I want to create will be a dummy betting app where you'd have stakes, you have units, you have prizes, and you have the winning average. Just something basic, not something very complex. So I'd create a constructor there, and I'll pass in the super function, and I would say this.state, set this to, let's say stakes. Let's call this stakes. And our stakes, let's set the default stakes to 4, and let's set the units to, let's say 32.08, and let's set the bet price, bet_price, set that to 0 because they'll have to input the bet price. Then let's say winning average. The winning average is going to be set to 22. Now let's save that. So let's come over to our JSX and let's print all of this out to the screen. So in our JSX, we are going to have one button, and in that button it's going to say, and in this button we are going to print out this.state.stakes. So the stakes is going to be printed out to the screen, the value of stakes. So we have another button that's going to print out this dot state dot units, and another button that's going to say this dot state dot bet price, and our final state button will be the winning average. So we're going to have this dot state dot winning average, and that's it for the buttons that we are going to allocate to the states. Now we need to make the users use the button to increase the value of stakes and the value of bet price. So to do that, I'll come here, right inside here, and I'll create another div. Now this div is going to take all of the buttons that I'll be using to increase the values and take the values back to default. So the first button will be to add the value of stakes. So we'll have plus stakes right there. The next button will be for the price, and the two other buttons will be for clearing the stakes back to the default and clearing the price back to the default. So we'll have plus price there, and we'll have XX, which is like clear the price value and clear the stakes value. The next thing to do is to have an onClick event on these four buttons here that will trigger a function when someone clicks on them, because we want somebody to click on this button to increase the stakes, somebody to click here to increase the price, or they click here to clear the stakes that they have on their board, or they click here to clear the price. Let's set this to price, to clear the price that they have on their board. So we are going to go along with this. First things first, let's create an onClick event here, and we are going to set the onClick event to, let's say, this dot handle stake, because it's going to be a function that we will create. And this other one here is going to have an onClick event also, which will be set to another function, this dot handle price. And this one right here is going to have an onClick event also that's going to be for clearing the stakes. So we're going to have this one saying this dot clear stakes, let's say clear stake, and this one will be for clearing the price. So we are going to say this dot clear price. So these are our four buttons that will actually have our app working, and it's going to look cool when we're done with that. Remember, we are going to create these event functions outside the render method and outside the constructor method. So somewhere here. Now let's start with creating the handle stake method, and we are going to just use the set states function to make this easy for us. So we are going to have stakes set to these dot state dot stakes times 2. Whenever someone click on the stakes button, it's going to multiply the value on the button times 2 every time they do that. So that's our own dummy betting app. And after this, we are going to have another method, which is the handle price method. It's going to use the this.setState function also, and we are going to have the bet price, and we are going to have these dot state dot bet price plus this dot states dot units, this dot state. When you click on the price, when you click on the price button, it's going to go from 0 to 32.08, which is 1 unit. We have 2 more methods, and one of them is going to be clear price. So let's handle the clear price method. And the clear price method is also going to use the set state function, because the set state function, as we know, is used to update or change states. For the clear price, we are going to have bet price set to this dot state dot price times 0. Of course, anything multiplied by 0 will give you a value of 0. So let's move over to the next, which is clear stick. So the clear stick method is going to have the this.setState function also, and let me scroll this up a bit so we can see clearly. It's going to have this, and in the setState function we'll have the stakes set to this.state.stakes multiplied by 0, and we are adding a value of 4 after multiplying it by 0, and that's because we want the stake value to return back to 4 when you click on the clear stake button. So we want that to come back to 4, and the way to do that is to multiply whatever value we have there by 0, which will give you 0, and we are going to add 4 to 0, which will give us 4. Just basic mathematics. So let's move over. Let me have some comments here. Let's say event handler for stake clicks, and let's have this right here, event handler for price clicks. We're going to have this here. Let's say events for clearing price, and let's come down here, the final one, let's say events for clearing stake. Now let's save that. Now let's run our server to see what we have. So I'm running my server here with the npm start command. So my server is running, as you all can see, but I have this message saying fail to compile. So let's go over to our browser to see what we have. Fail to compile. Displaybot.jsx does not match the corresponding name on disk. Okay, I have my file with the name displaybot, but the I is in uppercase. So always remember to take note of that. Now let me save that, and that's fixed. So let's go back to our browser to see what we have, but before that, let's check our server to see. You see, we have compiled successfully. Now on our browser we have this. Now if I click on this button, it's supposed to increase the stake value for me. Now let's click on one of these buttons to see the error we are going to have, and I'm going to talk about why we have that error. As you can see, it says cannot read properties set state of undefined, and the reason we have that error is because everything here looks very okay, but we have one issue, and that issue is because we are supposed to bind all those methods that we created. So let's say handle price is set to this.handlePrice.bind, and let's pass in this right there. Let's pass in the other one, which is handle stake set to this.handlestake this.handlestake.bind, and let's pass in this right there. And we have two other functions there, which is clear price, set that to this.clearPrice.bind, and we're passing this right there. And we have this.clearStake, which is the final one, set to this.clearStake .bind. Now let's pass in this there. Let's save this file. The server is running. Let's go back to our browser to see what we have, and let's have that. You see, it's working. The stake value is increasing, and the price value also is increasing. Now let's clear the stakes and let's clear the price. So this is what we have. This is what we are going to be working with, so we can explain how the context API works. So the next thing I'm going to be doing is I'll be heading over to my JSX, and I'll be giving my tags some class names so I can style them. So this is going to be called main div, and I'll give this div right here a class called, let me say, subdiv, and I'll save that. And I'll come over here, in the buttons, I'll pass in a class name my button for all of them. So let's pass that in there. So I've given a class name to all of my buttons in this div. For the buttons here, I'm going to style them differently. I'm going to have a class name here of bottom button. Just to mention, these class names are not default class names, so you can actually call them whatever you want to call them. And I would pass this here, and I would pass this here, and I'll pass this there. So this works fine. Now don't forget to create your index.css file, and don't forget to import your index.css file. So I'll come here, first things first, let me import my index.css file, even though I haven't created it yet. And I'll come here in the src folder, I would say index.css. Now in my index.css file, I'll throw in a wildcard that's going to say margin set to 0 and padding set to 0. And for the rest of the classes there, I'm going to copy and paste so I don't waste much of your time. So go ahead, style your board however you want it, and you can go ahead to tag me on Twitter. My handle is Joe_Brendan_. Tag me on Twitter so I'll see what you did with the styling. So let's paste all of this here. So these are just basic styling properties right there. Let's go to our browser to see what we have. As you can see, we have this. Now we have our app working. The real reason for this video is for us to use the context API and create a button where we can toggle the theme of our app from dark mode to light mode. So we are going to do that. The first thing we have to do is come over here in our VS Code, go to our src folder, and let's create a file where our context shall stay. So I'd call this bet context because I'm building a betting app, so it's just conventional for me to say that. Bet context. Now in our context file, we are going to import React and component. Now in our context file, we are going to create the context. Let's call the context bet context and set that to react.createContext, and let's invoke that function right there. The reason I have this export right here is because after creating the context, we'll have to export the context. I'm just doing that right here while creating the context, so I don't have to export it later. So let's come down after that and let's create a class component. Now this is going to be our context provider, bet context provider, and in our state here, let's get rid of this. I prefer putting my state in a constructor, so I'll have that, and I'll pass in the super function also. And here in the state is where I'm going to put my CSS properties for when my app is in dark mode or when it's in light mode. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a boolean that's going to set my app to the light mode first, so that someone can toggle it to light or toggle it to dark. And I'm going to pass in an object of properties for when my app is in light mode. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to have the fonts family for my app here, which is going to take a hex code of 5C, let's say 5C, 5C, 5C. And I'll have another value in the object that's going to be for the background. So let's call that background hex. And it's going to take a hex code of db, db, db. And I'm going to pass in another value for the buttons on the app. So the buttons are going to take a hex code of A3, A3, A3. So these are the CSS properties that will be passed into the app when it's in light mode. Now let's create another object that's going to have all the CSS properties when the app is in dark mode. So we are going to have dark option here and pass it in as an object. So we're going to have the same names there, mode font, and the mode font here is going to be a hex code of db, and we're going to have the background hex with a hex code of 5c. So for the button hex here, it's going to have a hex code value of 5c, 58 and 58, and that's that for now. Over here, what I have done so far is I have created my context. I have also created a class that is going to provide my context. So let's go ahead and see how to provide this context so that the whole of the app can consume these properties right here in states. So we are going to come here in our render method. We'll open that and let's pass in a div in the JSX box, and let's say bet context dot provider. Now let's open that also. Now first of all, let's pass in a value. This value is going to be what we are providing. I have created the provider tag. The next thing will be, what are you providing? So you use this value to set what you want to provide. So I'll set that to double curly brackets, and I'll use the spread syntax. Just have 3 dots there and just pass in this dot state, which means you have passed everything in state to our value variable there. I want us to go over to app.jsx. In app.jsx, we are going to wrap the display board, which is our app, with the context provider. And the way we do that is to say bet context provider. When you hit enter, it's going to auto import this for you. Now if your VS Code does not auto import, make sure you import this line, bet context provider, not the bet context, the provider, bet context provider. Open that and you place the display board in between the provider tags. So just like this. With these, you have provided the value of the context that we have created to this component, which means this component here can use everything in this file, or let's say everything in state right here, because that's what we provided as the value. The final thing we are going to do is to come over here inside the bet context.provider tag, and we are going to say this.props.children. The reason for this is this.props.children means this represents this whole class. Then the props of this class, the props and children, will be wrapped by bet context.provider. This means whatever is a prop to this class, bet context provider, can access this value here. And if we go over here to our app.jsx, we are going to see that bet context provider has display board wrapped in it as a child. Coming over here to bet context, where we said this.props.children, this tactically has brought display board to place it in here, and whatever is placed here can access the properties of this.state, which is all of this, the light theme, light option and dark option, which means any other component we create and wrap inside this tag here, the bet context provider tag, will be able also to access all of the values in this state, which is light theme, light option and dark option. I hope that is clear. If that's not clear, leave a question in the comment section. We have created our context and we have set our state and we have provided the context to all the components that are wrapped in our context provider. But for now, we only have one component wrapped in that context provider, which is display board. The final thing to do is to consume our context. Now, to consume our context, you would ask yourself, which of the components will consume this context that we have provided? Because the context that we have provided is this. Now, which of the components do we want to consume this context? We are going to come over here to display board. I'll show you guys how to consume a context. And this method is going to be applicable to class-based components only. You won't use this when dealing with React hooks. So the first thing to do is to come over here, outside the render method and outside any other method, use the static keyword and say context type. Set the context type to the context that you want to consume, which is bet context, not bet context provider, bet context. And when you hit enter, it's going to auto import bet context for you. Now, when I come up here, you will see I have bet context auto imported for me. Now, if your VS Code or your editor does not auto import, ensure you import this manually. Now, we are going to say const, and we are going to put the object sign there, and we are going to say light theme, and we are going to say light option, and we are also going to say dark option, and we are going to set that to this.context equal to this.context, just so that you're not confused. Context is a property in context type. So whenever you set your context to context type, context, which is that property in context type, will now represent everything you have destructured here. So let's go to the next line. In the next line, we are going to have const apply theme. Let's call that apply theme. This is not default. You can call this whatever you want to call it. And we are going to say, we are going to use the ternary operators. We are going to say light theme. If light theme is true, give us light option, or else give us the dark option, which is the dark mode. With this, we have stored the outcome of this if else statement here in apply theme, which means we can use this anywhere in our JSX. Now let me explain what we have here. You see the light theme here, light option and dark option. These are the values that we have here in our bet context file. The light option, dark option, and light theme, which means we have grabbed all of these and we have placed them here. They are now independent properties right here. You can use them however and whenever you want to use them. That is called destructuring. Now, we have destructured our context, which means we can start using our context in all of our HTML elements here. Let's use this in our div tag. In our div tag, let's pass in the style attribute there, and let's put in double curly brackets, and let's say background color, or background, let's say background color. Let's set the background color to apply theme. This apply theme here that stores the outcome of this ternary operation. Apply theme dot background hex. So background hex there is this background hex value that we have here. Let's save that, and the server is still running. Let's view our browser. As you can see, this is what we have. This is our light theme, and this appears like this because this ternary operation is true. Light theme is set to true. So if light theme is set to true, give us the light option, and the light option has all of these properties. So now we can set the styles for our button, and to do that, let's come here and say style, and let's set this to double curly brackets, and let's say color, say apply theme dot mode font. This is for the font, and we're going to have background color, which will be set to apply theme dot button hex. So this is going to be the hex code for our button. So we are going to copy this and put everywhere in our button, and let's come over here, let's paste that there, and let's paste this also, and let's save that. And let's also come down here and let's paste same styles for the buttons in this div tag. Let's go back to the browser to see what we have. This is our light mode for the app. Now if we come over here to our betcontext.jsx file and we change this boolean to false, and we go back to our app, you see we have a dark mode coming up. I've just noticed one error here. The font in our betcontext file does not have S there, so you just have to clean all the S there. It's mode font, not mode fonts. Take note of that error. So let's go back to our browser to see what we have. And now this is what we have for the dark mode. Just make sure you don't make any of the errors with the letters. If you have mode font here, make sure it is mode font in your displayboard.jsx. And also don't forget to put the hash sign or the pound sign there when writing your hex code in states. Now let's move ahead. The next thing I want to create, which will be the final thing for this project, is a button that is going to help us toggle this theme to light mode or dark mode, so that we don't have to come over to our betcontext file to change this value here to true or change it to false. Let's create another file here which will have the component for us. Let's call this change theme.jsx. Take note of your spelling and take note of which letter is uppercase or lowercase. In our change theme.jsx, we are going to import React and component, and we are going to create a class there, and let's call that change theme. Let's remove state because we are not going to use states in this class. So let's come over to our JSX and let's just create a button, and this button is going to be responsible for toggling the mode of our theme. We are going to create an onClick function right there, which will be set to nothing for now. So let's come over to our betcontext.jsx file and let's create this context and provide it so that we can access it in change theme.jsx. So in our betcontext.jsx file, we are going to have a function that changes the theme, and that's going to be an arrow function. Let's use the arrow function here, and let's say this.setState, and just the regular setting of state. We are going to toggle the light theme to this.state dot light theme, light option, light theme. And this statement here means the value of light theme should be negative here. So this means if light theme is true, when it comes into this function, it's going to be false, and if it's false, it's going to be true. So we are going to pass this function into the onClick event that we created in change theme.jsx, so that when somebody clicks that button, it's going to trigger this function, which will change the current state of light theme to the opposite. So we have two more things left in this file to do. The first one is to bind this function to our constructor method. So we have this.changeTheme is equal to this.changeTheme.bind, and we'll pass in the this keyword there. Let's save that. Now the final thing to do is to come over here in our value and provide this function that we have created so that we can consume this function in our change theme.jsx. So I'll say change theme is set to change theme. It's going to pass in the this keyword for me there, this.change theme. So with this, I have provided this context in my context provider. Now we can come over here and change theme, and we can consume this context like we normally do. So in our change theme.jsx, we are going to say static, and we're going to say context type set to bet context. And when I hit that, I have this auto import right here. Always take note of that. And in our render method, we are going to deconstruct what we are going to use. And what we want to deconstruct here is change theme. This is it here. We want to grab this value here, change theme, and the C is in lowercase. So that's why I always say take note of the letters you use. Now let's save that. Now the final thing to do on this file is we are going to pass this function inside the onClick event, and that's it. And that's all for this file. So with this, we have created the button, and we have created a context for the button, provided the context, and we have consumed that context in the file where the button stays. We can come here in app.jsx, and we can just pass in the button anywhere. So we can just say change theme, and it's going to auto import that for us also. And when we close that and go back to our browser, as you can see, we have one error here, and we have that error because we are supposed to set these to this.context. So let's go back to our change theme.jsx. When you deconstruct, you set this to this.context, and let's save that. And let's go back to our browser. You see we have this. Now if I click on this, it toggles the theme for me from light mode to dark mode, and from dark mode to light mode. So if you have any questions, say it in the comment section. This is how to create context, this is how to provide context, and this is how to consume context using the context API in React. And also take note that this method works for only class-based components. In our next video, I'm going to show you how to create context, consume context, and provide context in React hooks. For now, don't use this method in React hooks. It's not going to work. And if you have any questions about any of the process, just let me know in the comment section, and I'll be there to answer you. For now, don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget to share.